Hello, everyone. In this lesson, we will begin learning about jump statements. In some loops, there may be special situations where we need to exit the loop or proceed to the next iteration. This is where break and continue statements come into play. The break statement can be used in switch statements and loop statements. When used in a switch statement, break terminates a specific case and exits the switch structure. When used in a loop statement, break terminates the loop and continues with the code after the loop. We have already introduced the usage of break in switch statements. Now, let's explain how break is used in loop statements. We'll demonstrate the use of break with an example, and the relevant codes are shown on the screen. In this example, we use a while loop to print the value of x. When x becomes 3, we use the break statement to exit the loop. As a result, the output does not include the value of x when it is 4. The program's execution result is shown on the screen. When break appears in a nested loop, it exits the inner loop. If you want to break out of the outer loop, you need to use break in the outer loop. The codes are shown on the screen. In this code, the program prints 4 lines of asterisks. The program's execution result is shown on the screen. The continue statement is used in loop statements, and its purpose is to end the current iteration and proceed to the next iteration. Next, let's demonstrate the usage of continue by calculating the sum of odd numbers from 1 to 100. Next, let's demonstrate the usage of the continue statement. The specific code is shown on the screen. During the loop, we use a for loop to iterate over the value of variable I from 1 to 100. When the value of I is even, we use the continue statement to end the current iteration and proceed to the next iteration. However, when the value of I is odd, we accumulate the sum by adding it to the sum variable. In the end, we get and print the sum of all odd numbers from 1 to 100, which is 2500. The program's execution result is shown on the screen. Now, let's analyze the output of example 4 to compare the break and continue statements. We'll discuss the program's execution flow. In this program, we have 2 loops. First, there is a for loop with a loop variable I initialized to 0. The loop's condition is that I must be less than 10. When this condition is met, we enter the for loop body. Inside the for loop body, there are 2 statements. The first statement is an if statement. Which means we first check if the value of I is equal to 2. If this condition is true, the if branch will be executed. In the if branch statement, it first outputs the string program execution break signal, exiting the loop. And then executes the break statement. The purpose of this break statement is to exit the loop. After the if statement, there is another output statement that displays which iteration of the loop it is. The iteration number is represented by the value of variable I. Now let's take a look at the output of this for loop. The loop variable I starts from 0 and goes up to 9. But does it run until 9? We can observe that once the loop variable I becomes 2, the string is printed, and then the for loop is exited using the break statement. So how many iterations were there in total? When I is 0, we output iteration 0. Then, with each iteration, the value of I increments by 1, but it remains less than 10, satisfying the loop condition. When I becomes 1, it is not equal to 2, so we do not execute the if branch statement, and we still output iteration 1 second. Here, I equals 1. In the second iteration, I equals 2, and it still satisfies the condition I is less than 10, so we enter the loop. Now, the value of I is 2, and the if condition is true. Consequently, we enter the if branch statement, and the string program execution break signal exiting the loop is printed. After that, we can see that the loop is terminated using the break statement. Here, the purpose of break is to exit the current for loop. Next, we don't perform the remaining operations in the for loop, as the loop has ended. Next, we define another variable, count with an initial value of 0. Next is a while loop, and the loop condition is that the value of the count variable must be less than 5. With each iteration, the count variable is incremented by 1. Then, it checks if the variable's value is divisible by 3. If the result is true, it executes the continue statement, which means it will end the current iteration and move on to the next one. It's important to note that the continue statement is different from the break statement. The break statement ends the loop, while continue skips the current iteration and proceeds to the next one. Let's analyze the process. Initially, the count variable is 0, and the condition 0 is less than 5 is true, so it enters the loop body. The first line in the loop increments count to 1. Since 1 is not divisible by 3, the continue is not executed. Here, we execute the statement below the if statement in the first iteration. The value of the count variable is 1. As 1 is less than 5, the condition is true. It enters the next iteration, where count becomes 2. Again, 2 is not divisible by 3. Continue, so the continue is not executed, and it prints second iteration. In the third iteration, 2 is less than 5, and the condition is true. 2 plus 1 equals 3. Herein, the count becomes 3, and it is divisible by 3. So, the continue statement is executed when count equals 3, and the remaining statements in the loop body are skipped. It moves on to the next iteration without running anything for the third iteration. So, when we examine the output results, we see there's the first iteration, the second iteration, but there's no third iteration. This is because 3 is a multiple of 3. Continue, so the continue statement was executed, ending the current iteration, and skipping the subsequent output statement, proceeding to the next iteration. In the next iteration, the condition 3 is less than 5 seconds is still true, and 3 plus 1 equals 4. Since 4 is not a multiple of 3, the continue statement is not executed, and the output statement is executed when the fourth iteration is reached, and count is equal to 4. It is still less than 5. Consequently, the loop is entered once again. The value of count is now incremented by 1, resulting in count being 5. As 5 is not a multiple of 3, the continue statement is not executed, and the output statement, fifth iteration, is executed. At this point, count has a value of 5. Now, let's see if we can proceed to the next iteration. Can we proceed to the next iteration? When count is 5, the condition in the while statement becomes false. Since the loop condition is false, the while loop ends, and the program exits this loop. This example showcases the usage of both the break and continue statements. It is crucial to understand the distinction between them. The break statement directly exits the loop body, continuing with the execution of code outside the loop, in this case, the for loop. While the continue statement only exits the current iteration, proceeding to the next one. Therefore, you need to carefully differentiate between these two statements. Otherwise, unexpected exceptions may arise. We have now covered the topic of jump statements. Goodbye, everyone. The following code loops times